The anime begins by showing a young man named Yuji who is dealing with a monster in the wilderness. With the help of Sura the Slime and Proudwolf, his subordinates, Yuji managed to defeat the monster without any effort. Meanwhile, in a village called Pashton, there is an adventurers guild, where adventurers usually gather to get a quest. At that place, a male adventurer named Gale is seen hanging out with other adventurers, and he tells them that he has seen a slime capable of spitting fire. However, he is laughed at by the other adventurers because a slime can't do such a powerful thing. At the same time, Yuji arrived at the Adventurers Guild earlier than usual. The Adventurers Guild staff, a girl named Lily, thought he had failed in his mission because he returned so soon. But surprisingly, he tells Lily that he has completed his mission of collecting as many Drya flowers as possible. Unfortunately, because the Drya flowers Yuji collected had exceeded expectations, even meeting 2 years' supply, Lily immediately reported this to her manager, Aegis. Not long after, an adventurer suddenly appeared and frantically reported about the smoke signals coming from the forest, as well as the appearance of a large number of monsters. Upon hearing that, Yuji communicated with the slimes in the forest and asked what was happening. The slimes tell him that the herd of monsters suddenly appeared out of nowhere and is now heading to Pashton. On the other hand, Aegis ordered the adventurers to evacuate to a safe place because it was estimated that more than 10,000 monsters would attack the village. However, Gale and the other adventurers are determined to stay there to protect the residents. Yuji then offers to defeat the swarm of monsters by using a dragon bone that can create a burst of fire, which is said to be able to annihilate the swarm of monsters at once. At first, Aegis and the other adventurers seem to doubt Yuji, but Gale thinks they can count on him and then asks him about his plan. While Gale and the other adventurers prepare with their weapons to take on the swarms of monsters on the front line, Lily and Aegis distribute medicinal herbs made from Drya flowers to the adventurers and the Pashton villagers. On the other hand, Yuji ordered Proudwolf to evacuate the slimes still in the forest so they wouldn't be trapped among the swarms of monsters about to be exterminated. As the swarms of monsters approach the front line, Gale and the adventurers immediately launch an attack on the monsters and fight against them. Monitoring the situation from the top of the tower, Yuji issued his spell creation to determine the right attack, which could defeat the monsters but not cause much damage. At the same time, he gets a message from Dryad, his subordinate's forest spirit, informing him of the appearance of a mysterious man in the forest. From his suspicious behavior, Dryad assumed that the man was the mastermind behind the monsters' attacks because he carried a magic stone that could control the monsters. With his multiple tamed slimes, Yuji used his magic power to overthrow the mysterious man and deactivate the power of the magic stone. However, when he is about to interrogate the man for information, the man ends his own life instead. Afterward, Yuji ordered Proudwolf to return to the village with some of the slimes, while Dryad and the other slimes were ordered to hide because Yuji intended to launch his attack. Yuji, who had noticed Lily's presence behind him and had been watching him secretly for a while, asked her to withdraw the adventurers fighting on the front line. Gale and his comrades, pressed by the attacks of the monster swarms that came repeatedly, finally got help from the slimes who could spit fire. After everyone returned to the village, Yuji placed the slimes around the village and created a magical barrier to protect everyone while he annihilated the swarms of monsters with a fierce burst of fire. The attack managed to annihilate the swarm of monsters instantly, but in the process, Yuji lost a lot of strength and collapsed unconscious. Not long after, Yuji finally woke up, just as the adventurers and all the villagers were about to celebrate their victory by feasting. At the same time, Aegis and his men found the body of a man in the forest and took him to the village for further examination. Meanwhile, Yuji, who has recovered, decides to leave the Pashton village with his subordinates. Aegis then searched the man's belongings and found a lantern with the symbol of an organization that seemed quite dangerous, as Aegis planned to report it to the Central. Yuji, who was on his way somewhere, could find out information about the man because he had placed a slime in Aegis' office. The next day, Aegis and his companions finally arrived at a town called Kilya. Before heading to the Adventurers Guild in the city, Yuji took the time to rest and eat with the slimes and Proudwolf. Not long after, Yuji heard the sound of church bells, and a resident told him that an amazing priest had come from the Central. Afterward, Yuji signed up for the Adventurers Guild to get a mission. At first, he had difficulty registering because of his low rank. However, after knowing he has fairly reliable tracking ability, he is finally allowed to choose whatever mission he wants. Yuji intends to take on a fairly difficult mission and forms a guild party consisting of the male knife wielder Rhodys, the archer Tina, and the spear wielder Lisa. They started a mission to track down the location of the Earth Dragon, known as a powerful monster that is quite dangerous. Yuji and his group rushed to start their journey to carry out their mission. On the way, he received a little appreciation from his group members because he managed to track the whereabouts of a herd of monsters within 2 kilometers. In fact, Yuji had ordered Proudwolf and the slimes to leave first so that they could monitor the situation ahead and report it to him. After finally confronting the monsters, Rhodys managed to defeat them alone. In the evening, Yuji and his group decide to camp somewhere. Rhodys said they would take turns guarding and then determine the order. In his sleep, Yuji dreamed about when he first arrived in that world. He used to be a salaryman who often worked overtime. One day, Yuji, who had fallen asleep from overwork, suddenly woke up in a completely different world. In the other world, he is a monster tamer. The creature he first tamed was a slime. The slime took him to a place where he found magical books. With just one look, Yuji can master the magic abilities of the books he reads. In that place, he found a lot of slimes, which he then tamed. After that, the slimes studied the magical books in that place, which automatically, he got the knowledge and power from the magic books read by the slimes. Not long after, Yuji wakes up and gets news that Rhodys has disappeared somewhere, as well as Tina and Lisa. Proudwolf and the slimes watched the situation, then told Yuji that they found Rhodys walking through the forest in the middle of the night while secretly following him. Tina and Lisa turned out to have suspected Rhodys from the start and intended to reveal what he was actually planning. Rhodys then headed to a hut in the middle of the forest and met several men in the hut. A slime managed to infiltrate the hut and listen to him and a man talking, where he intends to sell Tina and Lisa to them before the blue moon appears. Tina and Lisa turned out to have been secretly investigating Rhodys because adventurers who had been his party members were always rumored to just disappear. Waiting outside the hut, they accidentally stepped on a trap he had set earlier. When they almost got caught, Rhodys and his gang decided to retreat after seeing a monster in the dark. The monster turned out to be Proudwolf and the slimes, who were ordered by Yuji to distract them from Tina and Lisa hiding not far away. Yuji then uses his magical power to freeze everyone in the hut. After the slimes brought Rhodys and his gang in front of Yuji, Tina and Lisa recognized one of them as Galios, the leader of a gang of bandits on the run. Because Rhodys has been caught trying to harm them, Tina and Lisa intend to abort the mission and return to the city. However, Yuji tries to convince them to continue the mission. After learning that he mastered magic and was reliable, they finally decided to continue the mission. Yuji and his group members did not encounter any obstacles during the trip because he used his magic power to defeat the monsters through Proudwolf and the slimes far behind them. Not long after, they were surprised by the sky suddenly turning purple, and the slimes notified Yuji of an oddity and a bad feeling that warns of the imminent danger. Meanwhile, elsewhere, an adventurers guild leader named Ryard was seeing the phenomenon of the purple sky and seemed worried about it. He asked Priest Stale about the phenomenon, and Stale explained that the phenomenon was caused by the blue moon shining brightly above them. In an old prophecy, it is stated that disaster will come when the blue moon appears. Sure enough, a giant blue dragon appeared not long after, and the sky turned bright again after its appearance. Knowing this, Yuji then ordered Proudwolf and the slimes to return because the giant blue dragon is a disaster-class monster that is quite difficult to deal with now. Having no other choice, Yuji and his group are forced to enter a mountainous area called the Light Gorge, which is the fastest shortcut to Killia. However, according to rumors, it is a place filled with monsters. But that wasn't a problem for Yuji because he had ordered Proudwolf and the slimes to defeat the monsters in front of them. But then, they were surprised by the appearance of the Earth Dragon. Tina and Lisa told Yuji to hide because they couldn't possibly defeat the Earth Dragon. But he refuses and chooses to try to fight the monster. At first, he launched low-level attacks so that he wouldn't look overpowered in front of them. Unfortunately, the Earth Dragon became quite a formidable opponent, so Yuji became desperate. He then uses the strong wind from the mountain gap to create the sandstorm that can block Tina and Lisa's view so that he can use one of his powerful techniques, Hellfire of Decimation, to burn the Earth Dragon instantly. After completing their mission, they returned to Killia and handed over the skeleton of the Earth Dragon to the Adventurers Guild. They seemed surprised because Yuji defeated the Earth Dragon, a very strong and dangerous monster. Because they managed to capture Galios and his gang, they were rewarded with quite a lot of money. Knowing that Yuji had succeeded in defeating the Earth Dragon, Ryard went to him and asked him to attend an important meeting to discuss the appearance of the giant blue dragon. Because Yuji was quite close to the location of the appearance of the giant blue dragon, Ryard asked him to describe the shape of the dragon. Surprisingly, he can accurately describe the form of the blue dragon, which is exactly the same as the one described in the Record Myths book that Stale always carries. The book mentioned that the giant blue dragon could wreak havoc by destroying a continent in just 3 days. Stale explained that along with the appearance of the blue dragon as a symbol of doom, the divine spirit was also sent into this world and possessed the power to defeat the blue dragon and save humanity from catastrophe. Upon hearing that, Ryard remembered that 30 years ago, he had witnessed priests performing the divine spirit summoning ritual in the royal capital. The result of the ritual would be 30 years later. He then said that the 30th anniversary of the ritual took place a week ago. Not long after, they were again surprised by the sky turning purple again, and Yuji got word from the slime who was watching the giant blue dragon that the monster had grown bigger. To face the giant blue dragon, Ryard decided to form the Crusade Guild and asked Yuji to join them. After the meeting, Yuji was visited by Stale, who wanted to discuss something important with him. Stale took him to a church, where he gave the Keshi's dagger to Yuji. Stale said that the dagger was the divine message entrusted to him, and he had received orders to give the dagger to Yuji. Realizing that many people will be killed when they face the giant blue dragon, Yuji decides to face the monster alone when everyone is asleep. Accompanied by Proudwolf and the Slimes, he rushed to where the giant blue dragon was. He used his strongest technique, Hellfire of Decimation, to attack the giant blue dragon. But unexpectedly, the attack did not affect a disaster-class monster like the giant blue dragon. Because long-range attacks did not succeed in bringing down the giant dragon, Yuji made up his mind to attack the monster at close range using the Keshi's dagger. Unfortunately, even though he managed to injure his left eye, the blue dragon could still survive and launch a barrage of attacks at him. Due to the attack, Yuji was desperate and lost a lot of strength from using too much magic power. But then, an option regarding a technique called the Divine Strike appeared, and he chose that option, even though he had never used the technique. With the Divine Strike technique, Yuji overthrew the giant dragon and beheaded the dragon with the Keshi's dagger. After defeating the giant blue dragon, he rushed back to the inn. The next day, Ryard comes to see Yuji and tells him that the giant blue dragon has been defeated by someone, so they don't have to face the monster. But, from his demeanor, Ryard seemed to know that Yuji was the one who had defeated the giant blue dragon, as well as Stale, who told him about the divine message. After that, Yuji was ready to continue his journey to a city called Ricardo, following the advice of Tina and Lisa, who said that the city has a pretty good climate and is also famous for its delicious culinary dishes. On the way, Yuji gets an emergency message from Dryad asking for his help harvesting the dragon mushrooms. Apparently, after Yuji defeats the giant blue dragon, the remnants of that battle grow the dragon mushrooms, which can be used to make healing potion and to increase magic power. With his slime's help, Yuji collected the dragon mushrooms in no time. Dryad then used her magical power to make the potion. But, due to the limitations of the pure water in that place, Dryad could not perfect the potion, so Yuji helped her distill water with the help of the slimes, even though it took quite a while. While waiting, Yuji noticed the rudimentary potion that Dryad was holding. The potion's color reminded him of the magical stone he had seen when he first met Dryads. At that time, he helped her, who became very weak due to the influence of the magical stone. She explained that the magical stone was made from the dragon's grace, an incredible power that comes from the bones of dragons that have been defeated. Because it has a very powerful magical power, many people are after the power of the dragon's grace and use it for their own interest, whether for good or evil. After waiting a long time, the slimes finally purified the water, and Dryad rushed to perfect the potion. Afterward, she gave some of the potions to Yuji and rushed back to her forest. Shortly after, Yuji continued his journey and entered a foggy area until finally arriving at a strange village. The residents looked at him with a smile that made anyone shudder to see it. A man asked him to stop by his house and asked Yuji about his purpose in entering the village. After learning that he is just a passerby and is heading to Ricardo, the man finally lets Yuji leave his house. Before leaving, Yuji asked the village's name, and the man replied that the name of the village was Meshus. After Yuji and his group left his village, the man communicated with someone via the crystal ball. He informed that person about Yuji, an adventurer, and the slime tamer, so there's nothing to worry about. Furthermore, he informed that his group will soon carry out the plan to harvest the dragon's grace at Dryad's Forest to achieve their goal of cleansing this world. Not long after, Yuji and his group finally arrived in the city of Ricardo. However, how shocked they were to find out that Ricardo was currently in abnormal status, as the entire city seemed to be covered in snow. Upon arrival, Yuji is informed by the city gate guards that Ricardo suddenly experienced winter 10 days ago, and there have been a few deaths from freezing these past few days. Knowing that he came to Ricardo to taste the delicious dishes that the city is famous for, the guard then recommends a restaurant that is quite famous in the city. But, when Yuji entered the restaurant, a waitress told him it was closed because they didn't have firewood to light the stove. He rushed to the forest to get good food and gathered firewood with the help of Proudwolf and the slimes. Afterward, he returned to the restaurant and asked the chef to make delicious dishes for him and his group. Even though Yuji gave the restaurant a lot of firewood, the waitress said that the whole town was running out of firewood. Therefore, he rushed to the Adventurers Guild and took on a mission to collect firewood. After registering for the mission, Yuji was asked to meet a man named Wadka, who would later tell all about the firewood needed by the townspeople. Afterward, Yuji used his magical power to cut down many trees with just one slash of his axe and split them into several pieces of firewood in no time. Wadka and everyone else cutting down the trees seemed so surprised by his ability and slimes, who was able to dry a pile of firewood quickly. The next day, Yuji returns to the restaurant for a delicious meal and is told by the waitress that they lack Rishia herbs, the secret ingredient for flavoring food that makes dishes typical of the city of Ricardo so delicious. Furthermore, the waitress told Yuji that Rishia herbs plantations were often damaged by wild animals, so they had a harder time getting Rishia herbs. Yuji and his group decided to eradicate the wild animals that always destroy the residents' plantations to enjoy delicious dishes that can't be found anywhere else. Without any trouble, Yuji could overthrow the beasts scattered in the forest with the help of Proudwolf and the slimes. After that, Yuji and his group found a suspicious crystal ball. He assumed that the crystal ball was made from the dragon's grace. Although not sure where it came from, Dryad told him that she can feel the magical power from the crystal ball and believes it can absorb magic because the crystal ball absorbs his magical power after he touches it. Upon hearing that, Yuji concluded that the crystal ball had absorbed the magic energy in the city of Ricardo, so the city was hit by a very extreme winter. Soon after that, Yuji and his group searched for other crystal balls and collected at least 100 crystal balls throughout the forest. Because he was forced to destroy a forest to continue the investigation, he asked Dryad's permission before destroying the forest. After the forest is destroyed, he finds a door leading to the dungeon, which is very wide and has many branches leading to other rooms. After walking down one of the streets, Yuji finds a very large machine, which turns out to be the magic injection device, which is used to create the magical crystal balls that are scattered throughout the forest. He returns to the surface and orders his slimes to follow the two robed men who appear panicked after learning that the magic injection device has been damaged by his previous attack. Yuji recognized the robes worn by the two men and the symbols on the buttons, which were the hallmark of the Blue Moon of Salvation sect, the same symbols found on the bodies of the men who were the masterminds of the monster attacks in the village Pashtun. While the slimes trailed the two men down the underground passage, Yuji and Proudwolf tracked them above the surface until they finally arrived at the meshes. The two men turn out to be residents of the village of Meshes and report the incident to their leader, Javier, who turns out to be the man who had previously asked Yuji to stop by his house. Javier and the villagers of Meshes turn out to be part of the Blue Moon of Salvation sect. Knowing that the magical crystal balls have been destroyed, Javier orders his men to collect as many magical stones as possible and kill anyone who sees their actions. Meanwhile, the slimes on Meshes spying on him found a book-filled room. Yuji then ordered the slimes to take all the books and documents there. Not only that, they managed to retrieve all the treasures hidden by the villagers of Meshes in a room. On the other hand, the villagers looking for the magical stones chose to end their lives when they were attacked by the slimes. Through the slimes, Yuji finally finds out that Javier and the remaining villagers are about to destroy the village with a machine designed to activate automatically if all the villagers of Meshes have died. When all the villagers have died, the machine finally activates automatically and triggers a very powerful explosion. However, Yuji was already prepared to create magical barriers. Unfortunately, the explosive power of the machine turned out to be much greater than Yuji expected, so he had to think of other ways to contain the explosion so as not to damage other areas around the meshes. In the end, he managed to prevent the explosion from reaching other areas using the total isolation array technique. After that, Yuji returned to Ricardo and found that the snow covering the entire city had melted and the air had become warmer. The townspeople of Ricardo thank Yuji for all his help and throw a party for him. After waking up, Yuji checked some documents he found in the meshes. Surprisingly, the writing on the document suddenly disappeared by itself, until finally, he found the only document whose writing was not lost. The document lists names of people targeted for assassination by the Blue Moon of Salvation sect, and Yuji is one of them. The scene then switches and shows two assassins carrying out a massacre in a castle, where one of the assassins also holds the same list of names. Realizing that Yuji can't stay in Ricardo because he is the target of assassination, he intends to go to the city of Beginia, which is said to be famous for the quality of the monster armor and very good armor. On the way to Beginia, Yuji realizes that he is being followed by two assassins after his life. Through the slimes, he ordered to spy on the two assassins closely. He could tell that they still wanted to observe his movements before deciding whether he was a threat that could jeopardize the plans being carried out by the Blue Moon of Salvation or simply a monster tamer whose strength was mediocre. Yuji could have killed the two assassins, but that would only provoke suspicion from the Blue Moon of Salvation sect. Therefore, he thought of a way to remove his name from the assassins list. When he finally arrived in Beginia, Yuji put on a play by pretending to be poor and stupid, so he was kicked out by several shop employees who were annoyed with his attitude. He told the slimes to pick up some coins that had fallen on the road, and instead, he used the coins to drink until he was drunk. Afterward, he attempts to pretend to be an amateur monster tamer while batting several bull monsters. Realizing that the two assassins were still watching him, Yuji asked Proudwolf to defeat the bull monsters. He did that knowing that Proudwolf was a cowardly wolf monster. Surprisingly, despite being timid, Proudwolf had a high fighting spirit, so he managed to overthrow several monsters. However, Yuji, who was forced to give a little magic power to the bull monsters to complete his play, was forced to show his ability to use the sword to defeat the bull monsters. Upon seeing that, the assassins are confused. Eventually, they conclude he is a complete novice with some natural sword skills and leaves to report to their employer, who reveals to them Mesh's destruction. The slimes overhear the assassins discussing their next target, Father Stale. Unwilling to let that happen, Yuji has his slime set off an ice explosion, freezing the assassins solid. After successfully defeating the assassins, he can act normally again and asks Beginia's best armorer, Gaegul, to make armor for his slimes and Proudwolf. Arriving at Gaegul's place, Yuji immediately stated his goal of making armor for his slimes. However, Gaegul said that the slimes and Proudwolf were the most powerful monsters, so he needed a special material to withstand the tremendous power of the slimes and Proudwolf. Gaegul then told about the red lesser fire dragon's jewel that appeared after defeating the red dragon. The material is the best material it has. But the jewel could not withstand the slime's tremendous power, so Gaegul needed the blue lesser fire dragon's jewel, which had far more powerful strength. He told the location of a mountain that was the abode of the lesser fire dragons, and Yuji was able to find the blue lesser fire dragons there and must defeat them if he wanted to get the best materials to make armor for his slimes and Proudwolf. After that, Yuji went to the Adventurers Guild in Beginia and took all the missions related to the lesser fire dragons. Seeing that he was very enthusiastic about defeating the lesser fire dragons, the female receptionist gave him some advice about the lesser fire dragon's weaknesses against air from the closest available river, which is home to a giant monster piranha. On the way to the mountain, Yuji tamed some red fire slimes, which helped him lure a giant monster piranha from the bottom of the river. After successfully luring the piranha monster to the surface, Yuji uses his magic power to freeze the monster. Surprisingly, the piranha monster is ineffective with ice magic, so Yuji is forced to burn the piranha monster with his fire magic. After that, Yuji and his group continued their journey and finally arrived at a mountain filled with hundreds of the red lesser fire dragons. He can easily defeat the red lesser fire dragons with the water from the river, which the slimes spout. Not long after, Yuji finally found the blue lesser fire dragon, bigger than the red dragons, and tried to defeat it similarly. Unfortunately, that didn't work, so he used the power of ice magic and increased it 3 times to freeze the dragon. In the end, he completed all the missions related to the lesser fire dragon by defeating 2 blue lesser fire dragons and over 200 the red lesser fire dragons. Besides that, he also managed to defeat a giant monster piranha, so he got a lot of money in return. Yuji immediately rushed to Gaegul's place and gave the jewels of the lesser fire dragons to Gaegul so he could make armor for Proudwolf and the slimes. With an abundance of jewels, Gaegul crafts armor for the slimes and Proudwolf that vastly increases their speed, though he warns Yuji that his most powerful spells could damage or even destroy the armor if overused. Gaegul tells Yuji that the only way to craft stronger armor is with a jewel from the true flame dragon, which lives in the volcano's lava and rarely comes to the surface. But there are times when the dragon shows its head to the surface, even though they cannot predict the time. After confirming that Gaegul's armor was functioning well, Yuji decided to rest at an inn. That night, Yuji got information from the slimes that the red lesser fire dragon suddenly went crazy. Seeing this, he became reminded of the monsters who experienced the same while still in the Pashtun village. Afterward, he ordered Proudwolf and the slimes to look for suspicious figures around the mountain. It didn't take long for Proudwolf and the slimes to find 2 men carrying several barrels whose movements were very suspicious. At the same time, the true flame dragon popped its head above the surface, and Yuji had a bad feeling about it. He ordered Proudwolf and the slimes to immobilize the 2 men, but both of them managed to dodge the slimes' attacks twice, so Yuji was forced to use other means to trap them. Yuji finally managed to catch the 2 men with the help of the slimes. However, just like the people from the Blue Moon of Salvation sect, the 2 men said a few words before deciding to end their lives. Yuji asked Dryad to check the barrel contents the 2 men were carrying. She confirms the barrels contain cursed water, a weaker version of the cursed crystals, probably designed to enrage the true flame dragon. Shortly afterward, heavy rain suddenly fell in the village, along with the true flame dragon's appearance, which made the residents panicky and runs for a safe place to save themselves. When everyone fled from the village, Yuji chose to stay and try to fight the true flame dragon. Yuji also tried to stop the movement of the flame dragon with his ice magic while he collected as much water as possible by building a dam in one of the rivers near the mountain. At first, he had difficulty stopping the flame dragon's movement and asked Proudwolf and the slimes to back off. When the volume of the river water finally exceeded the limit and destroyed the dam, he took the opportunity to drown the flame dragon, used his strongest ice spell magic, and froze the dragon solid, killing it. Afterward, the slimes collect the dropped flame dragon's jewel and discover an object near the volcano. Yuji gives the flame dragon's jewel to Gaegul, who promises to craft armor never seen before. Even though he didn't say it, Gaegul knew that Yuji was the one who had defeated the true flame dragon. Soon after that, Yuji brought a machine he found near the mountain and asked the guild's receptionist. After seeing the machine, the receptionist told Yuji that the machine was an artificial rainmaker usually used by residents to create rain when a prolonged dry season is hit. But she confirmed that the machine did not belong to the city of Beginia, so Yuji assumed that someone had deliberately activated the machine near the mountain to trigger the anger of the true flame dragon to rampage and destroy the city. After finishing his business in Beginia, Yuji hurriedly left the city and headed to the city of Ordarian, a city the two men had mentioned before they died. Arriving at Ordarian, Yuji immediately noticed that the townspeople were watching him very closely, as if they already knew about him. The residents of Ordarian are members of the Blue Moon of Salvation sect, so they know about him, who was one of the threats that must be removed. Shortly afterward, Yuji orders the slimes to spy on some residents and gets information about the Blue Moon of Salvation sect, the mastermind behind the artificial rain that fueled the fury of the true flame dragon, which nearly destroyed the city of Beginia. He knows they intend to kill him, even though his name has been erased from the assassins list. Afterward, Yuji meets Stale and his servant, Johan, who tells him about the Blue Moon of Salvation. Stale explains that he founded the Blue Moon Church to honor dead adventurers in his youth. A man named Walter joined the church and quickly became Stale's right-hand man. Soon after, Walter and his loyal followers murdered all other church members except Stale and established the Blue Moon of Salvation cult to cleanse the world of all sin and corruption, meaning all humanity. By divine revelation, Stale is convinced Yuji that he is the divine emissary and it is his destiny to defeat Walter. However, Stale does not tell Yuji the whole truth about his revelation. On the other hand, Walter receives a divine revelation the emissary will be victorious if Stale is killed. The next day, Stale decides to leave Ordarian with Johan. On the way, Johan asks him to enter a tree and argues that the tree has been cursed and must be purified before it causes a bigger disaster. But as it turns out, all of that was just a trap because Johan brought Stale in front of Walter and his followers. Walter immediately ordered his followers to kill Stale. However, he tried to fight them with his magic power. At the same time, Yuji tries to find out where Stale is because he wants to ask him something, but he couldn't find his whereabouts anywhere. The slimes tell Yuji that Stale entered one of the gaps in the tree and directed him towards the tree. On the other hand, Stale is surprised that Johan has betrayed and conspired with Walter to kill him. When Stale was in a state of urgency, Yuji finally arrived and immediately saved him. Not just standing still, Walter used his magic power to turn his followers into monsters and ordered them to kill Stale and Yuji while he and Johan rushed out of place to carry out their next plan. Walter and Johan then enter a room in which a giant machine is powered by the dragon's grace. Afterward, Walter places himself inside the machine that infuses his body with the dragon's grace. Yuji and Stale, who manage to defeat the monsters, rush after them to the room and see Walter, who mutates into a dragon. Yuji then outfits Proudwolf and Slime with their armor, allowing them to destroy part of Walter's body. But Walter absorbs the dragon's grace from his monsters, healing himself and growing larger. Coordinating his slimes, Yuji traps Walter in nets and manages to destroy his body. Before dying, Walter prays that the revelation will begin. His machine activates upon his death, absorbing his corpse, his monsters, and even Johan, to summon a one-eyed man who calls himself Sage. Upon seeing that, Stale is forced to reveal the rest of the revelation to Yuji, that the death of a teacher shall cause the emissary to be victorious. Stale had assumed it would be his death that made Yuji victorious. Still, it meant Walter's death would resurrect the original emissary that died centuries ago fighting the original blue dragon. Using magic similar to Yuji's, Sage attempts to kill him and destroys the cave to escape into the sky. Despite a ferocious fight, Yuji and his slimes cannot defeat Sage. Sage begins the salvation of the world by activating multiple rainmaker machines powered by the dragon's grace, creating rain clouds that rain grace over all the land, infecting monsters across the world. The monsters begin attacking nearby villages. Sage claims that he will provide salvation by destroying the world. The slimes reveal to Yuji that in every village he has visited, adventurers and citizens have risen up in defense of their homes, inspired by Yuji. Meanwhile, Stale receives a new revelation. When the sun and moon unite, divine judgment will be bestowed. Sage demands to know why Yuji insists on defending the world, and he only responds that he happens to like the world as it is. Using his most powerful spell, Divine Judgment, Yuji concentrates the spell into the Keshi's dagger, causing a bright light to temporarily eclipses the sun, just as in Stale's revelation. He then stabs Sage with the dagger and manages to destroy him. Despite every village celebrating his victory, Yuji once again chooses to quietly disappear. Elsewhere, the remaining cult members care to dismiss Walter's death as trivial as they are working on a new machine, the Purifier, which will destroy the entire continent, and with it, their final enemy, the Black Dragon of Judgment. Eavesdropping via his slime, Yuji is exasperated that the cult members still haven't given up. Sometime later, after collecting another bounty in a new village, he learns from a local guild leader that defeating dragons and Sage has made him famous across the continent. Yuji eventually realizes his desire to live in obscurity is now impossible. The moral that can be learned from this anime is to participate in protecting our Earth without having to have a reason, like Yuji, who takes care of his world with all his body and soul.